How can an ideal morph into the most bitter of prisons? For Judas Iscariot, that question echoed not just in his mind, but in the thick, dusty air of ** Jerusalem. The days blazed, and it wasn't just the relentless desert sun rising from the ground, but the suppressed fury of an oppressed people, crushed under the Roman heel. Judas felt that indignation in every fiber of his being, a burning flame he believed was divine. In that narrow alley, the scent of incense and spices mingled with sweat and dust. He watched, helpless, as a Roman centurion rough-handled an old Jewish merchant, knocking over his jars of olive oil. Judas's hand clenched into a fist, his nails digging into the flesh of his palm. His face, usually shrewd and impassive, was now a mask of contained hatred, a silent promise of retribution. His eyes, previously fixed on the scene, turned to the intense blue sky. No clouds, no shadows, just the merciless sun. "How long, Lord?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, almost inaudible. It wasn't a prayer for peace, but a cry for intervention, for divine justice to descend with fire. For Judas, faith wasn't just comfort, it was a weapon, a call to action. And he had been waiting for that action for a long time, with an impatience that consumed his soul. He had joined Jesus with a soul ablaze, convinced that, finally, the Messiah had arrived. Not a Messiah of gentle words and parables about mustard seeds, but the promised King of Israel, the Lion of Judah, who would crush their enemies. He saw the crowds gather, heard the teachings, witnessed the healings, and, with his practical, sharp mind, he took on the management of the disciples' finances, a task no one else seemed to take seriously. He kept the accounts meticulously, the money under control, always thinking of the future, of the day the kingdom would be established in its earthly glory. Before we dive deep into this story, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. It's such a joy to know these stories can touch hearts in so many different places. Leave your comment below and let me know. During a simple meal, under Jesus' watchful eye, Peter, with his usual impulsiveness, accused him. "Judas, you're too pragmatic. You think more about coins than spiritual things," he blurted out, with a tone of reprimand. Judas's face tightened. He wanted to retort, to explain that faith without provision was irresponsible, but before he could open his mouth, Jesus' calm voice was heard. "Peter," Jesus said, his voice soft but firm, "everyone serves with the gift they have. I trust Judas." Jesus' gaze met Judas's, and in that instant, a deep, almost palpable connection formed. There was no judgment, just trust. It was a bond only they seemed to share, a mutual understanding that went beyond words. Judas felt a rare warmth in his chest, a validation he rarely received. It was a relief, a confirmation of his worth. But that validation was about to be tested, to be shattered. The tension hung heavy in the air when Jesus gathered the 12. The silence in the small room was so dense it seemed to crush the disciples. For the first time, Jesus spoke openly, without parables, about his coming arrest, his suffering, and his death. The words fell like stones upon Judas's heart, each one a death blow to his hope. The others reacted with fear, with confusion, some with pure denial, but Judas reacted with shock and rage. Death, arrest, that wasn't a prophecy. It was a surrender, a cowardice. The Messiah wouldn't die. He would fight. The idea that the chosen one of God would prefer martyrdom instead of raising a sword and freeing his people was an affront, a betrayal of his own vision, his years of waiting, and his fervent faith. The faith that moved him, once an unshakable pillar, began to crack under the weight of this revelation. Jesus was destroying not only his hopes, but the very concept of a liberating Messiah that he nurtured in his soul. The man he followed with such devotion now seemed like a stranger, a leader who was disappointing him irremediably. His mind began to spin, looking for a way out, a way to force destiny's hand. Now get ready to dive into the incredible journey of someone who, with grit and openness, overcame unimaginable hurdles amidst sorrow and doubt. You'll discover how embracing self-compassion and recognizing your limits can be game changers in navigating your own crises and triumphs. Let's get started. The rage morphed into a cold determination. If Jesus wouldn't act, Judas would force him. If the Messiah chose the path of weakness, then he, Judas Iscariot, would compel him to the path of glory, to the redemption Israel so desperately deserved. The plan began to form in his mind, a dangerous and desperate scheme, but for him, the only possible path to liberation. His steps led him to the shadowy corridors of the Temple Mount, where power and intrigue wove their webs. The smell of sacrifice and heavy incense seemed to suffocate his breath. He sought out Caiaphas, the high priest, a man with a severe countenance and a calculating gaze. Judas didn't see himself as a mere greedy informant. He was a strategist, a catalyst. "He won't use his power unless he's forced," Judas said, his voice low but firm, like someone revealing a trump card. "Corner him, and you'll see the true King of Israel, the one who will free the nation, not with words, but with the strong hand of God." The 30 pieces of silver Caiaphas offered him weren't a payment for betrayal to Judas, but a symbolic seal, an assurance that his plan would be executed, that the Messiah would be pushed to the limit, forced to reveal his power. The weight of the coins in his purse felt like they were burning, a cold ember against his skin. He walked through the narrow streets, the city's buzz barely muffling the turmoil in his own tormented mind. Flashes of Jesus' trusting gaze assailed him, like ghosts of a loyalty he was about to tear apart. He saw a lame boy whose deformed leg dragged on the dusty ground, healed by Jesus' simple word, and for an instant his heart wavered. Jesus' power was undeniable. He could heal, he could transform. But why so little? Why just one boy when the whole nation cried out for healing? "This ain't enough," Judas muttered, reinforcing his own conviction. He could heal the whole nation. He could kick out the Romans with a single command. His mind rationalized, hardening itself against doubt, silencing the conscience that stubbornly whispered. The conviction that he was doing what was necessary propelled him. The arrival of Passover brought with it an atmosphere of foreboding, the Last Supper. The air was thick with the expectation of tradition, but also with an invisible tension. Jesus, with his enigmatic calm, announced the betrayal. The gaze of each disciple moved from one to another, disbelief and fear on their faces. But Judas's remained fixed, cold, awaiting the Master's next move. When Jesus knelt to wash each of their feet, the scene seemed unreal, the one who was supposed to be king, serving as the humblest of servants. As he approached Judas, Jesus didn't look away. His eyes, full of infinite sadness and a love that seemed to transcend the very pain of betrayal, met Judas's. "What you're going to do it quick," Jesus said, his voice a whisper. For Judas, that phrase wasn't a dark permission for betrayal. No, for him it was the final proof of Jesus' resignation. The last hope that Jesus would fight, that he would rise in messianic fury, completely extinguished at that moment. Jesus' apparent passivity sealed his fate. His tragic plan now seemed the only option to awaken the Messiah's true power. But he felt the unbearable weight of a choice he believed was necessary, yet which tore him apart inside. Jesus' trust in his gaze, that phrase, "I trust Judas," echoed in his soul, a silent lament amidst his steely determination. It was an internal struggle, the urgency of his political ideal versus the gentle voice of the one he loved, even if in such a misunderstood way. It was the battle between what he thought God wanted and what God was. How do you deal with moments when your deepest convictions clash with reality, when the truth you expected isn't the one that reveals itself? That's a chasm few dare to look into. The darkness of the night covered Jerusalem *** like a heavy cloak, and the damp air brought with it the premonition of something inevitable. Judas walked ahead of the temple guards and Roman soldiers, the rustle of their sandals and the clinking of weapons breaking the oppressive silence. The Garden of Gethsemane, He knew that place well, the twisted olive trees under the faint light of the torches. Jesus would be there. He knew it. Judas's heart pounded, an erratic drum in his chest. It wasn't fear, but a strange mix of anxiety and a distorted expectation. He approached Jesus, who was with the other disciples, their eyes fixed on him, with an intensity that pierced his soul. Jesus' voice, as he addressed Peter, seemed a distant lament, almost inaudible amidst the murmur of the soldiers. Then Judas did what had to be done. He drew near to Jesus and, as arranged, kissed him on the cheek. The touch of his lips on Jesus' skin, soft and warm, felt like a furnace burning in his own flesh. It was the signal. He recoiled, eyes wide, waiting. Lightning bolts should have struck from the sky. Legions of angels should have appeared, with flaming swords, to crush the enemies and proclaim the true king. But what happened? What Judas witnessed was absolute horror. Peter, impulsive as ever, drew his sword and cut off a servant's ear. And Jesus, the one who was supposed to summon a celestial army, instead touched the servant's wounded ear and healed it. Then he peacefully surrendered to the guards, his hands rising in a gesture of submission, not of battle. The silence of God was deafening. There were no thunderclaps, no flashes of light, no armies, just the healing of an ear and submission. In that instant, Judas felt the ground give way beneath his feet. His calculation was catastrophically wrong. His entire plan, his whole strategy to force Jesus to be the Messiah he wanted, crumbled to dust. The world spun. The rage dissolved into a chilling panic that climbed from his feet to his head. He had led his master to death, not to glory. He had traded Jesus' life for an illusion. The weight of the 30 pieces of silver in his purse, once a seal of a necessary pact, now felt like a leaden burden, each coin burning his skin like a brand. He fled. He ran aimlessly, the cold air cutting into his lungs, the sound of the crowd and the soldiers fading in his tormented mind. The dark olive trees of Gethsemane seemed to stretch out branches like accusing fingers, and the smell of the olive oil, which once calmed, now suffocated him. Every step was a stab of remorse. The guilt, once a distant shadow, now enveloped him completely, a suffocating cloak that stole his breath. Jesus' trusting gaze, that moment at the supper, the phrase, "I trust Judas," all of it replayed in his mind, a chorus of condemnation. He had broken the purest bond he had ever known. He betrayed love. He betrayed truth. In his desperate search for a kingdom of power and glory, he had ignored the kingdom that was already there, a kingdom of love, healing, and sacrifice that he, in his blindness, never understood. The pursuit of a distorted ideal had led him to destroy what mattered most. The pain was physical, a tight knot in his stomach, a burning in his throat. It was the bitter taste of defeat, not the defeat of a military plan, but the defeat of his own soul. The irony was cruel. He had handed over the Messiah, hoping he would reveal himself as king, but in truth, he had only revealed himself as a traitor, broken and without hope. It was in this abyss of despair that Judas sought the only reparation that seemed possible to him, to reverse the irreversible. In a panic, he raced back to the temple. The cold marble beneath his feet offered no solace. Every step was an accusation, an echo of his own madness. He stormed into the chamber where the priests, with their impassive faces, were counting the coins, the same 30 pieces of silver he had received. He wasn't there to negotiate, nor to ask forgiveness from men. This wasn't some heroic comeback, but the frantic dash of a man whose soul was disintegrating, a desperate attempt to escape himself. He just wanted to undo what he had done, to untie the knot he had tied in his own destiny. With a hoarse cry, Judas threw the bag of coins onto the polished marble floor of the temple. The metallic clink of the coins ricocheted off the walls, a jarring sound that seemed to tear the very fabric of the air. "I've sinned, betraying innocent blood," he bellowed, his voice choked, his throat burning. His face was contorted with anguish, his eyes red and swollen, searching for some sign of recognition, of understanding, of remorse in the priests. Caiaphas the high priest looked at him with icy disdain, not moving a muscle, not a flicker of empathy. "What's that to us?" he retorted with calculating coldness. "That's your problem." Those words, sharp as blades, sealed Judas's fate. There was no absolution there, only condemnation. The true climax wasn't what others said, but Judas's internal collapse, the final and irremediable realization of his error. In that moment, he finally understood the nature of the love he had betrayed, a love that heals instead of fights, that gives itself instead of dominates. It wasn't the political kingdom he sought, but a kingdom of the heart, of sacrifice, which he, in his idealistic blindness, had trampled upon. His defeat was total and irreversible. There was no escape, no turning back. Guilt crushed him. The final scene is one of overwhelming solitude. Judas was in a desolate field, the dry desert wind whipping his face. He wasn't looking at the tree with a rope in his hand, but at the horizon, towards Golgotha. With each passing minute, Jesus' sacrifice became more real, more painful in his mind. He had delivered him. The camera zoomed in on his face, where a single tear streamed down, hot and salty, leaving a trail in the dust on his face. And then, the echo of Jesus' words, like a whisper coming from the wind itself. "I trust Judas." That phrase, once a balm, was now the sharpest knife, piercing his soul into 1,000 pieces. He understood that the love and trust given to him were the true kingdom, an invaluable treasure he had traded for nothing, for a distorted vision of earthly power and glory. Judas Iscariot, the man who wanted to liberate the Messiah, had only condemned himself to an eternity of solitude and regret. The choice marked him forever, a testament to the thin and tragic line between faith and fanaticism. How do the choices we make, even those that seem right in our desperation, lead us down paths of no return? And so we conclude Judas's journey. It was painful to see how his good intentions, warped by his own vision and impatience, led him to such a tragic end. This story reminds us that, sometimes, the biggest battle isn't against the external enemy, but against our own expectations and our inability to fully trust in plans greater than our own. May Judas's story make us reflect on the weight of our decisions and the importance of seeking a deeper understanding of love and divine purpose.